So Wendy's sort of introduced things really well. She's talked about flowers and pollination and stuff. And so I think there's going to be a lot of talking about the pollination. But I think one of the things that hasn't been covered too well has been the actual behaviour of the flowers. So I've got this presentation here, avocado flower behaviour and the interaction with our southwest, Western Australia weather conditions. An alternative title could have been called Declan McCauley spends hours looking at flower sexual organs. So that's an alternative to it. So what I shall be talking about for the next 10, possibly longer, minutes is a little bit about flower behaviour, so what it is for our avocados, why it's important, what we are working, how we are working to understand it rather, and also what we've found so far in this sort of small project that we've been doing. I better just check. Can you all hear me okay? I tend to speak quietly. Okay, good. The people at the back are saying yes. The flower behaviour is crucial for understanding fruit set and sometimes the failure of fruit set that we often get in this region. So fruit set obviously starts with fertilisation, which for that to happen, you need a bit of pollination, and for that to happen, you need some kind of bug to move pollen around. And in our avocados, that's complicated because they have an interesting flower habit. It's called protogynous synchronous dichogamy, which effectively just means the male and female parts are separated by time. So in this case, there's two different types of that, type A, type B. Many already know this. So the type A is our house. They open as a female flower first, and they shut. They think about things for a bit, usually described as just one day, and then they'll reopen as a male, and they'll be ready to spread their pollen around, or rather get an insect to spread their pollen around. So this behaviour was described ages ago, so 1932. A.B. Stout was very into things, and they were looking at flower sexual parts like I have been recently. Also back then too, I thought they were a bit more conservative back then, but no. So that the abstract there kind of explains how things are as well with the A and when they open. So the female flower opening in the forenoon, closing at midday till the afternoon of the following day, and then they open as a male flower. And so this was done in California as well, which is not a very different climate to ours, but evidently it's different enough. So we didn't have a formal explanation of flower behaviour in our conditions. I think there was one from New Zealand, but that was about it. Sedgley and Annells from, I think it was 1981, did an explanation of flower behaviour in growth chambers. They had set temperatures, but their lowest temperature they used was 12 to 17 degrees. It's far too warm. You all know what the spring here is like. 12 to 17 is a lovely spring day. So anyway, part of the reasons why it's a really good idea to quantify the flower behaviour and its impact on the subsequent pollination is that can give you an idea of an early projection of fruit set success. Possibly there's a relationship between the growing degree units and the flowering fruit setting time with an idea of the eventual maturity of the fruit. A really important one is for beehive decisions, so consistently undesirable weather causing weird flower behaviour in the early spring, that can mean that you can put your beehives in later on and potentially save a bit of money on that. And also for decisions on fruit load management. So if you can very quickly, very early on, determine if you're going to have really good fruit set based on what the weather has been like, before the fruit set's really going on, then that can inform some prompt fertiliser and irrigation choices. So what we've done, so this has happened twice now. We've had 2 seasons under our belt. So over 3 sites, we have 2 at Pemberton and 1 in Busselton. And on each site we have 3 trees selected, and on each of these 3 trees we have a time-lapse camera pointed right at the inflorescence. And then amongst those inflorescences we place these things called thermistors, which are we poked them right into the right into the inflorescence or the stem, so we're trying to get an idea of the temperature inside the actual plant tissues. And also we had ones just dangled in the canopy measuring the air temperature, and also some weather stations there too. So we're trying to get an idea of what the flowers are doing, and then also the climate conditions, or weather conditions rather, at the same time. And then what I did is I would look through all the photos at great length and look when the female was opening and then shutting, taking note of that time, and then doing that, following that same flower until it opened as a male. So I've got here an extract from one location from 2021, the season then. And so this is very interesting. This is from around here, so this wouldn't be the Bustleton site. And so what we have, oh no, it's a bit hard to point out. If we start on the top line, 31st of the 10th, 2021, the female flower opens at 9 and it's shutting at 3 in the afternoon. So already that's later than the noon that is supposedly meant to be happening. There's a flower gap of a whole day, so it's not even the next day that the male is opening. And then the male opens sometime overnight, and then it's shut again overnight. In that case, it's actually 4 days that male flower was open. A bit unusual. Go down the table a bit to the 4th of the 11th. This was a bit more typical, as you can see from all the other ones. The females often open in the afternoon, and then they are opening either very late in the evening, or not opening, closing rather. They're closing very late in the evening or overnight. And of course, these cameras don't have infrared, so I have no idea when they're shutting overnight. We've attempted to find infrared cameras, but alas, nothing yet. And then the flower gap between the two stages, 2 days, even 3 days between the two stages before the male reopens. And in most cases, the male is opening very early in the morning. Well, 7:24 is pretty early. 9:57, that's getting a bit later. 4 o'clock in the morning, that's early. And then they close a whole 24 hours later. So that's how it looked for 2021, and this is for 2022. There's a few more here. And so it's really the same deal. A little bit earlier, I would say, for the female flowers opening. So this was from Pemberton as well, so for around here. So they're opening at 11 or 12 or 2 in the afternoon. And then mostly they're shutting, actually all of them are shutting on the same day, very late. And then the same deal. The male in this case, they've decided to be a bit different. They're not opening as early in the morning as they were the previous year, but they're still shutting usually a whole 24 hours or close to 24 hours later. So I haven't shown this, but one of the other things that happens, most of the flowers just skip the female stage and they just open as a male. Lots of them do that. And the most important thing here, because the male flowers are having this enormous period when they're open, 24 hours, sometimes longer, it's an excellent period for pollen transfer from the male to the female. So just for here, we didn't see this for down at Bustleton, but here at least, the evidence seems to suggest that there's not much of a need for polleniser trees. In saying that, polleniser trees bring other benefits. When there's cross-pollination with a different variety, the developing embryo that turns into the seed is said to be a bit more vigorous and you get a larger fruit. And that was from genuine research in the 80s, I believe. Now, of course, we have collected the temperature as well. So you have to try and compare what's going on with the hours the female flowers are open and the male flowers are open, and what's going on with the temperature. So the table above is just to show what's going on. So generally in Bustleton they were shorter. So Bustleton, Quinninup and Pemberton A, they were all from 2021. And then Pemberton B is from 2022. So Bustleton, shorter female hours and shorter male hours, whereas, Pemberton especially, very long time frames and long days of gap between the two stages. But you want to try and make a relationship out of this to actually understand what's going on. So in the graph below, with these various lines and stuff, so these are showing the relationship between the air temperature and And the hours, in this case, the hours the flower was open. So there's the hour the female flower's open in the blue, and then there's the hours the male in the orangey, and then there's the days gap. And so for those of you who don't know, we try and spit out this R squared here. Oh, that was a bit loud. And generally with the R squared, the closer to 1 it is, the stronger the relationship. And so, I mean, 0.21 isn't really anything. 0.37 is not a strong relationship. 0.56 maybe, but also not particularly strong. So it's interesting that you would expect the flowers to be controlled by temperature or something like that. And at least with the evidence we have, it's not entirely doing that. So trying to drill down into a bit more detail about the time the flowers are open as well. So in this case, we're looking at nighttime average temperature. So in some previous research from New Zealand, they showed the nighttime average temperature was very good for explaining the time the flower opened during the day. In our case, so 2021, it's not really, it's sort of almost random. And for when the 2022 flowers were included with 2021, it made it slightly worse. So that's in a way, it's a bit of a faff that it's very difficult to explain the actual behaviour of the flower using temperature. At this stage, I don't think we can confidently say that with our evidence that the temperature is causing the changes that we see. There might be other factors that are influencing things. But regardless of that, one of the key findings we have at the moment is that for this location here, the evidence we have is that there is a really long overlap with the female and male flowers, meaning that there's less reason to have pollinisers in the orchard. Now going forward, so there's one more season for this, going forward we really want to see where fruit that are being set are actually coming from, because at the moment, the season before, didn't manage to see any. This current season, we still haven't managed to see any flowers that actually turned into fruit. So it'd be a really key thing to find going forward. Now, okay, so that's the end of all of that. So the main take-home from this is that, so we've been trying to describe what's going on with flower behaviour for this region. It's not been well explained for our climate conditions, even California, which isn't very different to us, and the behaviour is quite different. And so we've managed to find that it's very hard to explain with temperature by itself, but at the very least for this region, the overlap between the male and female stages is very large, and justifies with evidence that there is no need for polliniser trees. And I'll leave it at that, but I think the questions can start now. Oh, thank you.
I'll just get you to talk into the microphone with your question so everybody can hear what the question is. So first question here from Dudley.
And Declan, what percentage of the inflorescence wouldn't have opened as a female?
Oh, I couldn't tell you that off the top of my head, but it's probably like 25% or something. It's a reasonable amount, and they just don't do it. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, hold on, you've got to wait for the thing.
Could not opening as a female flower have something to do with trees being forced with nitrogen and sort of jumping a step and going on?
I don't know. When all of the sites we've selected have covered a range of different fertiliser strategies, including ones where I would say fertiliser was not forced onto them, and it was still the same there. Oh, yes.
When do you want to go right back? Maybe I'll just get Daria.
Daria's going to do a Dorothy Dixie for me.
Declan, in some of the graphs that you showed of the correlation with the temperature,
Yeah.
Some of the data that they were actually skewing a bit those graphs were very low temperature, where there could have been a couple of outliers eventually that they were really off at really low temperature. The others, they looked a bit more straightforward, especially for the female flower. Do you think that that could be the case, that is actually really the lower temperature that is affecting, the higher temperature gives a bit more straightforwardness in possibilities?
Yes, in a way. I know when we were dealing with, at a couple of times when doing some of the data manipulation, I would deal only with the Busselton data where it was a bit warmer and things were a bit more straightforward there. But at the same time, like if something's a bit different, I don't know whether it's right to just call it an outlier. And usually they're not alone either. There's usually a couple of them that are just really weird, and I don't know if it's right to exclude them or not.
Declan, it's probably speculation, but if you've got particularly male flowers open for long periods of time, do you think that just because that flower is open, that it would be a viable source of pollen for that whole period? Like, do you think it's going to be a better source of pollen early or later, or any evidence from other crops?
That's a good question, and I don't really know. We have had thinking about a pollen viability analysis. We have a machine that can analyse pollen viability. And it's a question for at any time during the day. Even when the female flowers are open in the afternoon, for example, and they're shutting almost at night, is any of that pollen that they're receiving, even in that time, how much of that is viable? Is it less viable when it's super hot or when it's super cold? So no, I don't know, sorry.